Programmer walks into the office of an Arab billionaire, a flash drive trembling in her hand. Before she finishes her first sentence, he interrupts with a dismissive gesture. "You dare waste my time?" His eyes sweep over her from head to toe, full of contempt. "No pedigree, no connections, nothing." He snaps his fingers. "You are nobody. Remove her." Guards advance. She remains motionless, pale, her knuckles white as she clutches the flash drive. He has already returned to his phone screen, a cruel smile on his lips, as if she were dust to be swept away. But that small device he had just discarded held a secret, and that secret was about to turn his world upside down. If you love stories of revenge and poetic justice, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you don't miss any epic twists. The elevator doors close with a soft hiss, sealing her inside a mirrored cage that reflects her humiliation from every angle. Sara Malik stands perfectly still, staring at her own face multiplied infinitely in the polished metal. Her reflection looks small, diminished, exactly as he intended. The flash drive burns in her palm like a coal, though it's just plastic and circuits. She can still hear his voice echoing in her mind, that precise British accent he'd cultivated during his years at Oxford, weaponized now to cut her down. "You are nobody." The words loop endlessly, a curse she can't shake off. The elevator descends through 43 floors of steel and glass, each one representing a level of wealth and power she'll never touch, or so the world keeps telling her. Through the transparent walls, she watches Dubai's skyline slide past, all those impossible towers reaching toward heaven, monuments to ambition and oil money. The Burj Khalifa pierces the sky like a needle, and somewhere in one of these crystalline fortresses, decisions worth billions are made by men who look nothing like her, who would never give her a second glance. Her phone buzzes, a text from her roommate asking if she got the investment. Sara doesn't have the heart to reply. The truth sits heavy in her chest like a stone. She got nothing, worse than nothing. She got reminded of her place in the hierarchy, got shown exactly how the world sees her. A 28-year-old woman from Pakistan with a bachelor's degree from a state university nobody's heard of, living in a shared apartment in International City, the cheapest neighborhood where expatriates cling to their dreams before reality forces them home. The elevator reaches the ground floor, and Sara steps out into the lobby, a cathedral of marble and ambition. Security guards eye her as she passes, making sure the nobody actually leaves the building. Outside, the November heat hits her like a wall despite the late afternoon hour. She walks 3 blocks before her legs give out, and she collapses onto a bus stop bench. Not crying, not yet, just breathing, just existing in the space between hope and despair. 6 months ago, Sara had been working as a mid-level developer at a fintech startup that went bankrupt when their Series B funding fell through. She'd been coding since she was 14, teaching herself Python and JavaScript on a laptop her father had saved 2 years to buy. Programming was her sanctuary, the one place where merit actually mattered, where elegant code spoke louder than pedigree or connections. Or so she'd believed. When the startup collapsed, Sara didn't look for another corporate job. She couldn't stomach the thought of more meetings where her ideas were appropriated by colleagues with better accents, more interviews where she was asked to prove herself over and over, while mediocre men were hired on potential alone. Instead, she'd taken her severance pay, 3,000 dirhams that wouldn't last 2 months, and decided to build something that mattered. The problem she chose to solve was one she'd observed during her years in fintech. Traditional banking systems in emerging markets were hemorrhaging money through fraud, inefficient verification processes, and corruption. Billions of dollars disappeared into the gaps between archaic financial infrastructure and modern digital needs. Sara had spent 5 years watching these systems fail, studying their weaknesses, understanding their architecture. She'd worked like someone possessed, 16-hour days that blurred into each other, fueled by instant noodles and the kind of desperate hope that only comes when you have nothing left to lose. Her algorithm combined machine learning with blockchain verification in a way nobody had attempted before. It could process transactions at a speed that made existing systems look prehistoric, while simultaneously creating an immutable audit trail that made fraud virtually impossible. The code was elegant, efficient, beautiful in the way that only perfect solutions can be. Sara had tested it on sample datasets, then on larger pools of information she'd scraped from public records. The results were staggering. Her system reduced processing time by 87% and caught fraudulent transactions with a 99.4% accuracy rate. She'd built something revolutionary in a 300-square-foot apartment with a laptop that crashed twice a day and an internet connection that cut out every time it rained. But revolutionary code means nothing without capital to scale it. Sara had learned this the hard way. She'd approached 12 venture capital firms in Dubai and been rejected by all of them. Most didn't even grant her a meeting. The few that did spent 15 minutes looking at their phones while she talked, then told her to come back when she had a co-founder with a more impressive background. One investor had actually suggested she find a man to be the face of the company while she stayed in the background doing the technical work. Rashid Al-Zahrani had been her last hope. The billionaire had built his empire on disruption, or at least that's what the profiles in Forbes and Bloomberg claimed. He'd started with his family's construction money and parlayed it into a tech conglomerate that touched everything from e-commerce to artificial intelligence. He gave speeches about innovation and supporting diverse founders. His company's website featured smiling photos of women in hijabs working at computers, the kind of diversity theater that looks good in press releases. Getting the meeting had taken 3 months of persistent emails to his assistants, strategic comments on his LinkedIn posts, a carefully worded letter sent to his office explaining how her algorithm could save his banking division hundreds of millions annually. Finally, his executive assistant had called. 15 minutes, she was told. Mr. Al-Zahrani is very busy, but he's always interested in innovative solutions. Come prepared. Sara had prepared like her life depended on it, because it did. She'd created a presentation that stripped away all the technical jargon, focusing instead on the business case, the market opportunity, the return on investment. She'd practiced her pitch until she could deliver it in her sleep, timing each section down to the second. She'd bought a new blazer she couldn't afford, gotten her hair professionally styled, done everything she could to look like someone who deserved to be taken seriously. None of it had mattered. She'd barely spoken 3 sentences before he'd dismissed her like a servant who'd forgotten her place. The cruelty of it wasn't even in the rejection itself, but in the casual contempt. The way he'd looked through her rather than at her. The way he'd returned to his phone as if she'd already ceased to exist. Sara looks down at the flash drive still clutched in her hand. The entire algorithm is stored on this tiny piece of plastic and metal. Months of work, thousands of hours of coding, debugging, testing, refining. Her masterpiece, her ticket out of obscurity, worth nothing apparently because she's nobody. The bus arrives and Sara gets on, paying the 5 dirhams fare and finding a seat near the back. Through the window, she watches Dubai slide past. All those glittering towers built by people who'd never doubted themselves because the world had never given them reason to. The bus fills with other nobodies like her, construction workers heading home from job sites, maids finishing their shifts at wealthy households, drivers and cleaners and delivery people, all the invisible labor that keeps the city of dreams functioning. Her apartment building is a concrete box in a neighborhood designed for temporary people, migrants and expatriates, who exist in Dubai without ever really belonging to it. Sara climbs 3 flights of stairs because the elevator is broken again, and unlocks the door to find her roommate Priya on the couch, watching some Bollywood drama on her laptop. Priya takes one look at Sara's face and mutes the show. That bad? Sara sets down her bag, places the flash drive on the tiny kitchen counter, and finally, lets herself cry. Not dramatic sobs, but quiet tears that feel like admitting defeat. Priya doesn't say anything, just makes tea and sits with her until the crying stops and the tea goes cold. What are you going to do? Priya asks eventually. Sara doesn't know. Her savings are almost gone. She'll need to find work soon. Probably return to the same kind of corporate job she'd been trying to escape. The algorithm will sit on that flash drive, unused, another brilliant idea that died because the wrong person had it. That's how the world works. Genius is abundant. Opportunity is scarce. And opportunity only comes to those who already have everything else. That night, Sara lies in bed staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Her phone buzzes at 2 in the morning with an email notification. Probably spam, she thinks. But she checks it anyway because sleep isn't coming. The email is from someone named David Chen at Quantum Ventures, a venture capital firm based in Singapore. She doesn't remember contacting them, but she'd sent out so many inquiries over the past months that they all blur together. She almost deletes it, too exhausted for another polite rejection, but something makes her read it. Ms. Malik, I came across your white paper on distributed ledger verification systems in emerging market banking infrastructure. I'm in Dubai for the next 3 days and would be very interested in discussing your work. Would you be available for coffee tomorrow morning? I apologize for the short notice, but my schedule is quite compressed. The email includes a phone number and the name of a cafe in downtown Dubai, the kind of place where coffee costs more than Sarah's daily food budget. She reads the email 3 times, looking for the catch, the scam, the inevitable disappointment. The white paper he mentioned is something she'd posted on a technical forum 6 months ago, before she'd learned that nobody reads technical forums except other developers who can't help her. She'd forgotten about it entirely. Sarah considers ignoring the email. She's so tired of hope, of building herself up only to be knocked down again. But there's something different about this message. It's not vague or performative. This David Chen person has actually read her work, understands what she's built. At 2:30 in the morning, Sarah replies. She has nothing to lose except more dignity, and she's already lost enough that a little more won't matter. She suggests 9 a.m., gives him her phone number, and sends the email before she can overthink it. Sleep comes in fragments, full of anxiety dreams where she shows up to meetings in her pajamas or can't remember how to speak. When her alarm goes off at 7, Sarah feels like she's been awake the entire night. She dresses carefully, the same blazer from yesterday because it's the only professional thing she owns, and takes 2 buses to reach downtown Dubai by 8:45. The cafe is all exposed brick and Edison bulbs, full of confident young people having confident conversations about disruption and innovation. Sarah orders a black coffee and finds a table in the corner, clutching the flash drive in her pocket like a talisman. By 9:15, she's convinced herself that David Chen isn't coming, that the email was a mistake, or a prank, or a fever dream. Then a man in his 40s, Chinese features, wearing jeans and a simple black t-shirt, approaches her table. Sara Malik? She stands, nearly knocking over her coffee. Yes. You're David Chen? He smiles, and there's something genuine in it, something that doesn't feel like the performative warmth of people trying to sell her something. Thank you for meeting me on such short notice. I know my email must have seemed random. Please, sit. They sit. David orders a cappuccino and then, without any preamble, opens his laptop and pulls up her white paper. It's covered in highlights and annotations. I've been working in emerging market fintech for 15 years, he says. I've seen maybe 3 genuinely original ideas in that time. Yours is one of them. Sarah doesn't know what to say. She's so used to defending her work, explaining it to people who don't really care. That straightforward appreciation feels surreal. I looked into your background, David continues. I know about the startup that folded. I know you've been pitching this algorithm around Dubai without success. I also know that you met with Rashid Al-Zahrani yesterday, and that it didn't go well. Sarah stiffens. How do you know that? Dubai is a small city in some ways. People talk. Rashid's reputation precedes him. He's brilliant at identifying trends, but terrible at identifying talent. He's lost some of the best innovators in the region because he can't see past pedigree and connections. David closes his laptop and looks at her directly. What he did to you yesterday wasn't about you or your work. It was about his own limitations. Something tight in Sarah's chest loosens slightly. She realizes how desperately she needed to hear that, to have someone acknowledge that the rejection wasn't evidence of her inadequacy, but of his. I want to make you an offer, David says. My firm specializes in finding exceptional founders who've been overlooked by traditional investors. We provide not just capital, but infrastructure, mentorship, and access to networks. We'd like to invest $2 million in your company for a 20% equity stake. We'd help you build a team, refine the product, and position it for major banking institutions across Southeast Asia and the Middle East. Sarah's brain stutters to a halt. $2 million, 20%. She does the math automatically, a habit from years of coding. That values her company, her algorithm, her work at $10 million. $10 million for something that Rashid Al-Zahrani had deemed worthless less than 24 hours ago. I don't understand, Sarah hears herself say. You've never even seen the code. You don't know if it actually works. David smiles. I've read your white paper. I've looked at your technical specifications. I've seen the test results you published. But more importantly, I've learned to trust my instincts about founders. You built something revolutionary with no resources, no support, and no encouragement. You persisted through rejection after rejection. That tells me more about your chances of success than any demo could. He slides a folder across the table. This is a term sheet. Take it home, read it carefully. Have a lawyer review it if you want, though I should warn you that we move quickly. I need a decision within 48 hours because we have 2 other deals in the pipeline and limited bandwidth. But Sara, I want you to know something. What you've built is genuinely special. The only question is whether you're ready to scale it. Sara opens the folder with shaking hands. The term sheet is there, dense with legal language, but the key numbers jump out at her. $2 million, 20% equity, 18-month runway, support for hiring a team of 5, access to Quantum Ventures' network of banking partners across Asia. Why me? Sara asks, the question she's been too afraid to articulate. Why now? Because the best opportunities are found where others aren't looking, David says. Everyone wants to invest in Stanford dropouts with famous advisors and viral demos. That's not where value is created. Value is created by people like you, working in the margins, solving real problems that matter. I've built my career on finding those people before anyone else does. He finishes his cappuccino and stands. Read the term sheet. Call me with any questions, but Sara, I want you to think about something. Yesterday, a man with more money than imagination told you that you're nobody. Today, I'm offering to bet $2 million that he's wrong. Which story do you want to be true? After David leaves, Sara sits in the cafe for 2 hours, reading and rereading the term sheet until she has it memorized. She Googles Quantum Ventures and finds a legitimate firm with an impressive portfolio. She reads about David Chen and discovers he's exactly who he claimed to be, with a reputation for finding overlooked founders and turning them into success stories. She looks for the catch, the hidden clause, the too good to be true angle, and finds nothing except a straightforward offer from someone who sees value where others saw nothing. By noon, Sara knows what her decision will be, but she forces herself to wait, to be methodical, to consult with Priya and to sleep on it. But the truth is, the decision was made the moment David called her work genuinely special, the moment someone finally saw her. She calls him the next morning. I accept your offer. Excellent, David says, and she can hear the smile in his voice. Welcome to Quantum Ventures. Let's change the world. The next 3 months are a blur of activity that makes Sara's previous life feel like a dream. David wasn't exaggerating about moving quickly. Within a week, lawyers have drafted and finalized the investment agreement. Within 2 weeks, Sara has hired her first employee, a senior developer from Google, who's excited about the technical challenges. Within a month, she's moved from her shared apartment to a small office in Dubai, Internet City, the city's tech hub. The algorithm that had existed only on a flash drive is now being stress-tested on real infrastructure, refined by a team of 5 exceptional engineers who treat Sara's work with the respect it deserves. They find small inefficiencies she'd missed, optimize her code, and scale it beyond what she'd thought possible. The 99.4% accuracy rate becomes 99.7%. Processing time drops even further. David introduces Sara to his network, and suddenly she's having conversations with CTOs of major banks, heads of financial innovation at institutions that move trillions of dollars annually. They take her seriously because David vouches for her, because Quantum Ventures' reputation opens doors that her own credentials never could. She learns to pitch to boardrooms full of men in expensive suits, learns to handle objections and technical questions, learns to translate her vision into language that financial executives understand. In month 4, they get their first major client, Bank Rakyat Indonesia, one of the largest financial institutions in Southeast Asia, agrees to a pilot program. If Sara's algorithm performs as promised, they'll roll it out across their entire infrastructure, processing transactions for over 40 million customers. The contract is worth $30 million over 3 years. The pilot program launches in month 5, and the results are extraordinary. Sara's algorithm processes transactions faster and more securely than anything the bank has used before. Fraud detection improves dramatically. Customer satisfaction scores rise because transfers that used to take days now take seconds. Within weeks, Bank Rakyat Indonesia accelerates the timeline, wanting to implement the system immediately across all branches. Word spreads quickly in the banking world. If Bank Rakyat Indonesia is using this technology, it must be legitimate. Other institutions start reaching out. Sara finds herself fielding inquiries from Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, the Philippines. Her little company of 6 people suddenly has more demand than they can handle. David brings in a business development expert to help manage the pipeline. They hire 10 more engineers. Sara moves the company to a larger office. She's working 100-hour weeks, but it doesn't feel like work. Not in the way her corporate jobs had. This is her creation, her vision, growing beyond what she'd dared to imagine. In month 8, something unexpected happens. A venture capital firm in Silicon Valley reaches out, not to invest but to acquire. They offer $90 million for the entire company. Sara is stunned. The algorithm she'd built in poverty less than a year ago is now worth $90 million to someone who understands its potential. She calls David. "What do I do? What do you want to do?" he asks. Sara thinks about it. $90 million would change her life forever. She'd never worry about money again, never face the kind of desperation that had driven her to create the algorithm in the first place. But she'd also lose control of her creation. Some faceless corporation would own her code, make decisions about how it's used, probably fire her within a year once they've extracted all her technical knowledge. "I want to keep building," Sara says. "I think we're just getting started." "Then turn them down," David says simply. "But know that the offers will keep coming. You've built something genuinely valuable. The question is how big you want it to become." Sara turns down the acquisition offer. She's not building a company to sell it. She's building it to prove something, to herself and to every person who was told they're nobody, that genius can come from anywhere, that the gatekeepers don't get to decide who succeeds. More offers come, each one larger than the last. 120 million, 150 million, 230 million. Sara turns them all down. She's not interested in a buyout. She's interested in building an empire. By month 10, Sara's company, which she's named Meridian Solutions, has 28 employees and clients across 7 countries. The algorithm has processed over $50 billion in transactions without a single security breach. Banks that had ignored her pitches a year ago are now begging for meetings. Venture capital firms that had rejected her are calling David, asking if there's any way they can still invest. Sara remembers every rejection, every dismissive email, every investor who'd looked at her credentials and decided she wasn't worth their time. She remembers them all, but she doesn't call them back. She doesn't need them anymore. She never really did. In month 11, Fortune magazine publishes a profile. "The nobody who built a billion-dollar algorithm," reads the headline. The article details Sara's journey from rejected founder to tech CEO, her breakthrough algorithm, and the remarkable speed of Meridian Solutions' growth. They estimate the company's value at $1.2 billion, based on revenue projections and comparable acquisitions in the fintech space. The article goes viral in tech circles. Sara's LinkedIn blows up with connection requests. Her email floods with interview requests, speaking invitations, and messages from young women in Pakistan and India and across the global south telling her that she's inspired them, shown them what's possible. The article mentions briefly that Sara had been rejected by multiple investors in Dubai before finding backing from Quantum Ventures. It doesn't name names, but anyone in the regional tech community knows who those investors were. One of them, the article notes, had dismissed her so completely that he'd had security remove her from his office. Sara is in her office, finally large enough for a proper desk and a window with a view, when her assistant knocks on the door. "There's someone here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's urgent." "Rashid Al-Zahrani?" Sara looks up from her laptop where she's been reviewing code. The name hangs in the air between them, weighted with history. She hasn't thought about Rashid Al-Zahrani in months, has been too busy building her company to dwell on that humiliation. But hearing his name brings it all back. The elevator descent, the cruel dismissal, the way he'd made her feel small. "Tell him I'm not available," Sara says. Her assistant nods and leaves. Through her office window, Sara sees Rashid in the lobby, looking uncomfortable in a building where he's not the most important person present. He's wearing an immaculate suit that probably costs more than her entire first month's rent used to be. He's holding flowers, ridiculously, as if flowers could somehow erase what he'd done. Sara watches him argue with her assistant, sees the confusion on his face when he's told that no, Ms. Malik cannot see him. No, she doesn't have time in her schedule. No, there's no point in waiting. He's not used to being refused. She can see it in his body language, the entitled frustration of someone who's always gotten his way. He leaves the flowers with her assistant and departs. Sara returns to her code review, but she's unsettled now, the past intruding on her present. That evening, her assistant brings her the flowers along with a card. Sara opens it reluctantly. Ms. Malik, I owe you an apology. I made a terrible mistake in judgment, and I'd like the opportunity to make it right. Please allow me to meet with you. Rashid Al-Zahrani. Sara throws the card in the trash. She doesn't owe him her time or her forgiveness. She doesn't owe him anything. But Rashid doesn't give up easily. Over the next 2 weeks, he sends gifts to her office. More flowers, a ridiculously expensive pen set, a basket of gourmet chocolates. Each comes with a card requesting a meeting. Sara donates the gifts to charity and continues ignoring him. Then he tries a different approach. He starts making comments on her LinkedIn posts, praising her work, calling her an inspiration. He gives an interview to a business magazine where he talks about the importance of supporting diverse founders and admits he's made mistakes in the past by not recognizing talent when it was in front of him. He never mentions Sara by name, but everyone knows who he's talking about. Sara finds it pathetic and infuriating in equal measure. He wants redemption now that she's successful, wants to rewrite history so he can claim some connection to her success. The man who'd called her nobody wants to be associated with the billionaire founder she's become. Month 12 arrives, and with it, the biggest opportunity yet. The Monetary Authority of Singapore, essentially the central bank, reaches out. They want to implement Sara's algorithm across the entire country's banking infrastructure. It would be the first sovereign nation to build its financial system on her technology. The contract is worth $500 million over 5 years, with the potential for billions more if it's successful. The deal requires Sara to present to the MAS board, a group of the most powerful financial regulators in Asia. David helps her prepare, but mostly Sara doesn't need help. She knows her technology inside and out. She knows its capabilities, its limitations, its potential. She's lived with this algorithm for over 2 years now. It's as much a part of her as her own heartbeat. The presentation is scheduled for a tech conference in Singapore, one of those massive affairs where thousands of founders, investors, and executives gather to discuss the future. Sara is invited as a keynote speaker, a remarkable honor for someone who's only been in business for a year. The conference organizers want her to tell her story, the arc from rejection to success that makes for such compelling narrative. Sara accepts the invitation. She's learned that visibility is power, that telling her story helps other women who are struggling in the margins, being dismissed by gatekeepers, wondering if they're foolish for believing in themselves. The conference is enormous, held in a convention center that feels like a small city. Sara's keynote is scheduled for the main stage, with an expected audience of over 3,000 people. The night before, she can't sleep, running through her speech over and over, making sure every word is perfect. When she walks onto that stage the next morning, the lights are blinding and the crowd is a dark ocean of faces. Sara spots David in the front row, giving her an encouraging nod. She spots executives from her client banks, investors who'd passed on her company, journalists who'd written about her journey. And there, in the 5th row, she spots Rashid Al-Zahrani. He's sitting between 2 other investors, looking polished and confident as always. Their eyes meet for just a moment, and Sara sees something flicker in his expression. Guilt, maybe. Recognition, certainly. She wonders what he's thinking, seeing her on this stage, about to address thousands of people who respect her work. Sara begins her keynote. She tells her story simply, without embellishment or dramatics. She talks about building the algorithm in poverty, about the rejections she faced, about the investor who had her physically removed from his office. She doesn't name Rashid, but she describes the scene in enough detail that anyone who knows the story will understand who she means. "He told me I was nobody," Sara says, her voice carrying across the silent auditorium. "And for a long time after that, I wondered if he was right. Not because I doubted my code, I knew the algorithm worked, but because I doubted whether someone like me with my background and my credentials could ever be taken seriously in this industry. I doubted whether the world would ever see past what I looked like and where I came from to recognize the value of what I'd built." She pauses, letting the silence stretch. "What I learned, though, is that the people who tell you you're nobody are protecting their own fragile sense of superiority. They need you to be nobody, because if you're somebody, if you're actually brilliant and capable and worthy, then their entire worldview collapses. Their pedigrees and their connections and their inherited advantages become meaningless in the face of genuine merit." Sara can see Rashid in the crowd and see him shifting uncomfortably in his seat. Good, she thinks. Let him be uncomfortable. Let him feel a fraction of what he made me feel. The algorithm I built is now processing over $200 billion in transactions annually across 8 countries. It's being used by 53 major financial institutions. And next month, it will become the backbone of an entire nation's banking infrastructure. That algorithm, the one that was dismissed as worthless, is now valued at $5 billion by independent analysts. The number lands like a bomb in the auditorium. $5 billion. Sara can see the journalists frantically typing on their phones, investors recalculating their portfolios, competitors trying to understand how she'd gotten so far so fast. I'm telling you this not to brag, but to make a point. Genius is everywhere. It's in tiny apartments and state universities and immigrant communities. It's in all the places where the gatekeepers refuse to look because they're too comfortable with their own biases. The question we should all be asking ourselves is, how much talent are we missing because we're looking for it in all the wrong places? How many potential world changers are we dismissing because they don't fit our narrow definition of what a successful founder looks like? Sara wraps up her keynote to thunderous applause. As she leaves the stage, journalists swarm her, asking for interviews, asking her to name the investor who rejected her, asking for more details about the $5 billion valuation. Sara handles it gracefully, giving enough information to be interesting without being vindictive. Later that afternoon, during a break between conference sessions, Rashid approaches her. Sara is in the lounge area, reviewing notes for her meeting with the MAS board, when she sees him walking toward her. She considers leaving, but decides against it. She's not afraid of him anymore. She doesn't owe him anything, but she's curious what he could possibly say. "Ms. Malik," he says, stopping a respectful distance away. "Could I have a moment of your time?" Sara looks up from her notes. "I'm very busy, Mr. Al-Zarani. I'm sure you understand." He flinches slightly at the formality, at being addressed with the same cold distance he'd used on her. "I know. I just wanted to say, your keynote was remarkable. What you've built is truly extraordinary." "Yes," Sara says simply. "It is." Rashid seems uncertain how to proceed. He's probably never had to genuinely apologize for anything in his life. "I owe you an apology. What I said to you that day in my office, how I treated you, it was inexcusable. I let my prejudices blind me to your talent. I made assumptions about you based on superficial factors that had nothing to do with the quality of your work." Sara sets down her notes and gives him her full attention. "You're right. You did. Do you know what the worst part was? Not the rejection itself. I've been rejected plenty of times. The worst part was how casual your cruelty was. You didn't even see me as a person worthy of basic respect. I was just an inconvenience to be removed." "I know," Rashid says quietly, "and I'm deeply sorry. If there's anything I can do to make amends—" "There isn't," Sara interrupts. "You can't undo what you did. You can't give me back the months I spent doubting myself, wondering if I was delusional for believing in my own work. What you can do is learn from this. You can look at every founder who walks through your door and ask yourself whether you're actually evaluating their work or just confirming your own biases." She stands, gathering her notes. "You called me nobody, but I was never nobody. I was somebody building something extraordinary, and you were too limited in your thinking to recognize it. That's your failure, not mine. I don't need your apology or your investment or your validation. I never did." Sara walks away, leaving Rashid standing alone in the lounge. She feels lighter somehow, unburdened. She'd imagined this confrontation countless times, had scripted devastating speeches in her head, but the reality is simpler than her fantasies. Rashid Al-Zahrani doesn't matter. His opinion never mattered. The only opinion that mattered was hers, and she'd always known her own worth, even when the world tried to convince her otherwise. The meeting with the MAS board goes brilliantly. Sara presents her technology with confidence and precision, answers their technical questions with ease, and addresses their concerns about security and scalability with concrete data. By the end of the presentation, they're not just convinced, they're excited. The contract is finalized within a week. When the news breaks that Singapore's entire banking infrastructure will run on technology developed by a 29-year-old woman from Pakistan who'd been working in poverty 18 months earlier, it becomes the biggest story in tech. Forbes puts Sara on their cover. The Wall Street Journal writes a feature. CNN wants an interview. Harvard Business School asks if they can write a case study about Meridian Solutions. The $5 billion valuation that Sara had mentioned in her keynote becomes conservative as more analysts weigh in. Some estimate the company's worth at $7 billion. Others say $10 billion is more realistic given the revenue projections. Suddenly, Sara isn't just a successful founder. She's one of the youngest self-made female billionaires in the world. It's surreal and overwhelming, and sometimes Sara still feels like that woman on the bus, clutching a flash drive and wondering if she'd wasted her life on a dream. But then she looks around her office, sees her team of brilliant engineers building on her foundation, sees the clients whose businesses are transforming because of her technology, and she knows it's real. David calls her one evening, 6 months after the Singapore deal closes. "I have news," he says. "We've received an acquisition offer that I think you need to consider seriously. It's from a consortium of 3 major banks. They're offering $12 billion for full ownership of Meridian Solutions." $12 billion. Sara does the math automatically. With her 75% ownership stake after taxes and David's percentage, she'd walk away with approximately $6 billion. Enough money to never worry about anything again for multiple lifetimes. Enough money to fund 1,000 other founders like her, to build schools and hospitals and infrastructure in Pakistan, to reshape the world according to her values. "What do you think I should do?" Sara asks. "I think you should do whatever makes you happy," David says. "You've already won. You've built something revolutionary. You've proved everyone wrong. You've inspired countless others. If you want to sell and use that capital to pursue other interests, that's a perfectly valid choice. If you want to keep building and see how big Meridian can become, that's also valid. There's no wrong answer here." Sara thinks about it for days. She consults with her team, with her family, with Priya, who's still her roommate even though Sara keeps offering to buy her a penthouse. She thinks about what she wants her legacy to be. In the end, Sara decides to sell, not because she's tired of building or because she doubts Meridian's potential, but because she's realized something important. The algorithm was never the end goal. It was proof of concept, proof that she could create value from nothing, that genius doesn't require privilege, that the gatekeepers are wrong. With $6 billion, Sara can do more than run one company. She can reshape the entire ecosystem that had tried to keep her out. The acquisition closes on a Tuesday morning in March, almost exactly 2 years after Rashid Al-Zahrani had her removed from his office. Sara signs the papers in a conference room overlooking Dubai Marina, surrounded by lawyers and bankers and David, who's beaming with pride. When the transaction completes, Sara's phone buzzes with a notification from her bank. The number has so many zeros that her brain struggles to process it as real. She takes the rest of the day off, something she hasn't done since founding Meridian. She goes back to her old neighborhood, to the concrete building where she'd lived with Priya in that tiny apartment. The building looks shabbier than she remembers, more worn down. She climbs the 3 flights of stairs and knocks on the door. Priya opens it, sees Sara standing there with tears streaming down her face, and pulls her into a hug without asking any questions. They sit on the same couch where Sara had cried 2 years ago, where she'd felt like she'd lost everything, and Sara tells her about the sale, about the money, about how nothing feels quite real. "What are you going to do now?" Priya asks. The same question she'd asked that night when everything seemed hopeless. This time, Sara has an answer. "I'm going to make sure no one else has to go through what I did. I'm going to fund founders who look like us, who come from where we come from, who get dismissed by people like Rashid Al-Zahrani. I'm going to build the support system I wish I'd had." Within 3 months, Sara launches Meridian Ventures, a venture capital firm with an initial fund of $500 million. But it's not like other VC firms. Sara doesn't care about pedigrees or prestigious universities or family connections. She actively seeks out founders working in obscurity, building brilliant solutions to real problems, getting rejected by traditional investors who can't see past their biases. Sara hires a team of analysts whose job is to find hidden genius in unexpected places. They scour technical forums and GitHub repositories and academic papers from state universities. They attend hackathons in secondary cities and read blog posts by developers in emerging markets. They look everywhere that traditional VCs don't. The investments start flowing. A woman in Nigeria building solar microgrids for rural villages. A team in Bangladesh creating low-cost water purification systems. A developer in Egypt building educational software for Arabic speakers. a founder in the Philippines solving logistics challenges for small farmers. All brilliant people working on important problems, all overlooked by the investment community because they don't fit the Silicon Valley stereotype. Sara doesn't just provide capital. She provides mentorship, connects founders to her network, helps them navigate the obstacles she'd faced. She remembers what David had done for her and pays it forward 100 times over. Within 2 years, Meridian Ventures has invested in 63 companies across 4 continents. 12 have already become profitable. 3 are valued at over $100 million. The tech press writes about Sara's unorthodox investment strategy. Some call it charity disguised as venture capital. Others say she's found a genuine market inefficiency, that by looking where others don't, she's accessing superior deal flow at better valuations. Sara doesn't care what they call it. She knows it works, because she was living proof that it works. 4 years after selling Meridian Solutions, Sara is invited back to the same conference in Singapore, where she'd given her keynote. This time, she's not just a speaker, but the headline attraction. The conference organizers want her to reflect on her journey and discuss the future of diverse founders in tech. Sara accepts the invitation. She's learned to embrace her platform, to use her story to inspire others who are still struggling in the margins. The night before her keynote, she has dinner with David, who's become not just a business partner, but a genuine friend. "Do you ever regret selling Meridian?" David asks over dessert. Sara considers the question. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd kept building it, how big it could have become. But then I think about all the founders we've helped through Meridian Ventures, all the companies that exist now because we gave them a chance, and I know I made the right choice. Meridian Solutions was my victory. Meridian Ventures is my legacy." The next morning, Sara walks onto the same stage where she'd told her story 4 years earlier. The crowd is even larger this time, over 5,000 people. She spots familiar faces, founders she's invested in, sitting in the front rows. She spots journalists and competitors and admirers. And there, in the back, she spots Rashid Al-Zarani. He looks older, she notices. The confidence he'd worn like armor seems diminished somehow. She'd heard through the tech community grapevine that his company had struggled in recent years, that several of his investments had failed, that his reputation for identifying talent had taken serious hits. Meanwhile, multiple founders he'd rejected, not just Sara but others, had gone on to build successful companies. People were starting to question his judgment. Sara begins her keynote by acknowledging how much has changed since her last speech on this stage. She talks about selling Meridian Solutions, about launching Meridian Ventures, about the 63 companies they've funded, and the thousands of jobs those companies have created. She shares statistics about the founders they've backed: 72% women, 85% from underrepresented minorities, 93% from outside traditional tech hubs. 4 years ago, I stood on this stage and talked about being dismissed as nobody, Sara says. I talked about the investor who had me physically removed from his office because he couldn't imagine that someone like me could build something valuable. Today I want to talk about what happened next, because the story doesn't end with revenge or vindication. It ends with transformation. She clicks to her next slide, showing photos of founders from Meridian Ventures' portfolio. These are the real nobodies, the people still working in obscurity, still getting rejected by gatekeepers, still wondering if they're delusional for believing in their own genius. When I sold Meridian Solutions for $12 billion, I could have done anything. I could have retired to a private island. I could have bought a sports team. I could have spent the rest of my life attending charity galas and giving speeches about my success. Sara pauses, making eye contact with people throughout the auditorium. But I realize that my success, in isolation, doesn't change anything. It becomes a feel-good story that makes people believe the system works, that cream rises to the top, that talent will always be recognized eventually. That's a comforting lie, but it's still a lie. The truth is that for every Sara Malik who gets lucky and meets the right investor at the right time, there are 1,000 brilliant founders who never get that chance. They work in obscurity forever, or they give up, or they waste their lives in corporate jobs that don't deserve them. She advances to another slide, showing the returns on Meridian Ventures' portfolio. So I decided to stop being an exception and start being an example. Not an example of how the system works, but an example of how we can build a better system. Every founder we invest in is someone that traditional VCs overlooked. Every company in our portfolio is solving real problems for real people. And our returns? We're outperforming most major venture funds because we're accessing better deals at better valuations. Sara clicks to her final slide. It's a quote she'd written herself. Genius is everywhere. Opportunity is not. Our job is to fix that. The investor who rejected me taught me something valuable, though it's not what he intended. He taught me that the gatekeepers are fallible, that their judgment is clouded by bias and privilege and lazy pattern matching, that they're leaving money on the table and talent undiscovered because they're too comfortable with the status quo. He thought he was teaching me my place. Instead, he taught me that there's no place I don't belong. Sara wraps up her keynote to another standing ovation. As she leaves the stage, she's immediately surrounded by journalists and founders and investors, all wanting a piece of her time. She handles it gracefully, having learned over the years how to navigate these situations. But she keeps scanning the crowd for one particular face. She finds Rashid in the hallway outside the main auditorium. He's standing alone, looking at his phone, but Sara can tell he's been waiting for her. She considers walking past him, but something makes her stop. "Mr. Al-Zahrani," she says. He looks up, startled. For a moment, they just look at each other, 4 years of history hanging between them. Sara is struck by how diminished he seems, how much smaller than she remembers. "Your keynote was incredible," Rashid says quietly. "What you've built with Meridian Ventures, the impact you're having, it's truly remarkable." "Thank you," Sara says simply. "I've thought about you often over these past years," Rashid continues. "About what I said to you, how I treated you. It's become something of a cautionary tale in investment circles, did you know that? How I had the opportunity to invest in what became a $12 billion company, and I had security escort the founder out of my office." Sara doesn't respond, just waits for him to continue. "I've tried to change," Rashid says. "I've funded several founders from non-traditional backgrounds. I've tried to check my biases, to look beyond credentials and connections. But I'm not sure it's enough. I'm not sure I can ever undo the damage of all the opportunities I missed, all the brilliant people I dismissed." "You can't," Sara says, not unkindly. "You can't undo the past, but you can make different choices going forward. You can use your platform and your resources to amplify voices that are usually silenced. You can admit when you're wrong instead of trying to rewrite history. You can do the work of actually changing instead of just performing change." Rashid nods slowly. "For what it's worth, I am genuinely sorry. Not just because you succeeded despite my rejection, but because I failed to see your humanity. You were never nobody, and I had no right to treat you as if you were." Sara studies him for a long moment. She doesn't forgive him, not entirely, because some wounds don't fully heal. But she recognizes something in his expression that she hadn't seen 4 years ago. Genuine remorse, actual humility, the painful awareness of his own fallibility. "I believe you," Sara says finally, "and I hope you mean it, because there are thousands of founders out there right now who are exactly where I was 4 years ago. Brilliant, desperate, one meeting away from either breakthrough or breakdown. They need investors who see them as human beings first, as opportunities second. They need people who understand that genius doesn't come with a pedigree attached." She glances at her watch. "I have another meeting, but Mr. Al-Zahrani, I want you to think about something. You called me nobody when I had everything to prove. Now I'm somebody, and I'm using that platform to prove that nobody is actually nobody, that everyone deserves a chance to show what they're capable of. That's the difference between us. You're still trying to identify winners. I'm trying to create them." Sara walks away, leaving Rashid standing in the hallway. She doesn't look back. She said everything she needs to say to him, given him more grace than he probably deserves. The rest is up to him. That evening, Sara returns to her hotel room and opens her laptop. She's received over 300 emails since her keynote, most from aspiring founders asking for funding, advice, or just hoping to connect. She knows she can't respond to all of them, but she reads every single one. Somewhere in this pile of messages might be the next brilliant founder working in obscurity, the next person who just needs someone to believe in them. One email catches her attention. It's from a woman in rural India who's building an app to connect small farmers directly with urban markets, eliminating the middlemen who typically take 70% of profits. The woman has a degree from a local college Sara's never heard of, and no business experience. Her English is imperfect, but her passion is clear. She's built a working prototype with borrowed money, and it's already being used by 50 farmers in her village. Sara reads the email 3 times. She sees herself in this woman's story, that same mixture of brilliance and desperation, that same conviction that she's on to something important even though nobody will take her seriously. She forwards the email to her team at Meridian Ventures with a note, "Priority review. This is exactly who we exist to find." Later that night, unable to sleep, Sara stands at her hotel window looking out at Singapore's glittering skyline. She thinks about the journey that brought her here, from that tiny apartment in Dubai to this moment. She thinks about the flash drive she'd clutched in the elevator, convinced she'd failed. She thinks about David Chen taking a chance on her when nobody else would. She thinks about all the founders she's helped since then, all the companies that exist because she chose to pay forward the grace she'd been shown. The tech world likes to talk about disruption, about moving fast and breaking things, about changing the world. But real change, Sara has learned, isn't about breaking things. It's about building new systems that work better than the old ones. It's about using success not as an endpoint, but as a platform for lifting others up. Sara's phone buzzes with a message from her team. They've reviewed the email from the farmer app founder in India, and they want to move forward with an investment conversation. Sara smiles. Another nobody about to become somebody. Another brilliant person getting the chance they deserve. She thinks about Rashid Al-Zahrani and wonders if he'll actually change or if their conversation will just become another story he tells at conferences, another example of his supposed growth without any real transformation. But she realizes it doesn't matter. Rashid's redemption or lack thereof isn't her responsibility. Her responsibility is to the thousands of founders still waiting for their chance, still believing in themselves despite a world that tells them they're nobody. The next morning, Sara flies back to Dubai. She's building a new headquarters for Meridian Ventures, a space designed to feel welcoming rather than intimidating, a place where founders from any background will feel comfortable walking through the doors. The building will have meeting rooms named after overlooked innovators throughout history, people whose genius was dismissed in their time but later recognized. There will be a library stocked with books about founders who succeeded despite the odds. There will be mentorship programs and networking events and resources for founders who don't have access to traditional support systems. 6 months later, the headquarters opens. Sara hosts a launch event and invites all 63 companies from Meridian Ventures' portfolio, along with journalists, other VCs, and anyone who wants to learn about their model. The turnout is overwhelming. Over 700 people fill the new building, creating the kind of energy and optimism that Sara remembers from her early days at Quantum Ventures. David Chen is there, of course. He finds Sara during the reception and raises his glass. "To the nobody who changed everything," he says. Sara clinks her glass against his. "To all the nobodies," she corrects. "Past, present, and future. They're the ones who actually change the world. The rest of us just try to keep up." That night, after everyone has left and Sara is alone in her new office, she opens the drawer of her desk and pulls out something she's kept all these years. A flash drive, scratched and worn, containing the original code for the algorithm that started everything. She doesn't need it anymore. The code has been implemented and improved and is now running on systems across the world. But she keeps it as a reminder of where she came from, of the woman who refused to believe she was nobody, even when the world insisted she was. Sara plugs the flash drive into her computer and opens the files. Looking at the code now, with 4 years of distance and experience, she can see its flaws, the inefficiencies she'd later fix, the elegant solutions she hadn't yet discovered. But she can also see its genius, the core innovation that had made everything else possible. This code, written in poverty and desperation and hope, had been worth $12 billion, but more importantly, it had been worth believing in. 5 years after Rashid Al-Zahrani had her removed from his office, Sara Malik stands in front of the United Nations General Assembly. She's been invited to speak about technology and economic development in emerging markets, about how innovation can lift entire communities out of poverty. It's the kind of platform that once would have been unimaginable to her, the daughter of a shopkeeper from Lahore who'd taught herself to code on a second-hand laptop. She tells her story one more time, but this time it's not about revenge or vindication. It's about transformation and possibility and the responsibility that comes with success. She talks about the 63 companies in Meridian Ventures' portfolio, which have now grown to employ over 12,000 people across 4 continents. She talks about the ripple effects of giving people a chance, how one investment in one brilliant founder can transform an entire community. And she talks about the flash drive, about the algorithm she'd built in obscurity that had seemed worthless to everyone except her. That code didn't change, Sara tells the assembled delegates and dignitaries. Its value was always there. What changed was that someone finally looked at it without bias, without preconceptions about who deserves opportunity and who doesn't. That's the lesson I hope you take from my story. Genius is everywhere. We just have to be willing to see it. After her speech, Sara is approached by dozens of people wanting to discuss investment opportunities, partnerships, initiatives in their countries. She collects business cards and makes promises to follow up, playing the role she's become comfortable in over the years. But her mind is already elsewhere, thinking about the next founder waiting for a chance, the next nobody who's actually somebody. That evening, Sara receives an email that makes her laugh out loud. It's from Rashid Al-Zarani. He's launching a new initiative, he writes, focused on investing in overlooked founders from emerging markets. He's hired a diverse team of investors and is implementing blind evaluation processes to reduce bias. He wants Sara's advice on how to do this properly, how to actually create change rather than just performing it. Sara considers ignoring the email. She doesn't owe Rashid her time or expertise. But then she thinks about all the founders who might benefit if he actually follows through, if he actually changes his approach. She thinks about how change happens not through punishment but through education and opportunity. She writes back, "I'm glad you're doing this, it's needed. Here's my advice. Don't try to find the next Sara Malik. Try to find the current Sara Malik, the one who's still unknown, still struggling, still being dismissed. Try to see people before their success, not after. That's the hard part. That's the part that actually matters. And Rashid, if you're doing this for redemption or good publicity, don't bother. The founders will see through it immediately. Do it because it's right. Do it because you genuinely want to fix the system that allowed you to miss me in the first place." She sends the email and closes her laptop. Tomorrow she'll review 20 new investment opportunities. She'll mentor 3 founders who are struggling with scaling challenges. She'll give an interview to a Pakistani newspaper about what young women in STEM should know. She'll continue building the ecosystem she wished had existed when she was desperate and hopeless, clutching a flash drive in an elevator and wondering if she'd wasted her life on a dream. But tonight, Sara Malik, the former nobody who the world tried to overlook, stands at the window of her UN hotel room and looks out at New York City. She thinks about the journey that brought her here, about all the moments when she could have given up, could have believed the people who told her she wasn't good enough. She thinks about the flash drive and the algorithm and the $12 billion and everything that came after. And she thinks about all the other nobodies out there, working in obscurity, building brilliance, waiting for someone to see them. She can't save all of them. She can't fix all the broken systems that keep genius hidden. But she can keep trying, keep investing, keep telling her story so that others know it's possible. The city glitters below her, millions of lives intersecting, millions of stories being written. Somewhere in those streets is the next brilliant founder being dismissed by gatekeepers. Somewhere is the next person who needs someone to believe in them. Sara makes a silent promise to keep looking, to keep building, to keep proving that nobody is actually nobody. Because that's not just her story anymore. It's become her mission, her legacy, the thing she'll spend the rest of her life fighting for. The Arab billionaire fired the nobody programmer, but the nobody was never nobody. She was a genius waiting to be recognized. And now she spends every day making sure that other geniuses don't have to wait as long as she did. If this story inspired you, if you see yourself in Sara's journey, remember this. Your value isn't determined by who recognizes it. Your genius isn't diminished by who dismisses it. Keep building, keep believing, keep proving them wrong. And when you finally succeed, when you finally get your chance, remember to reach back and help the next person who's exactly where you were. That's how we change the world. Not one success story at a time, but one ecosystem at a time, one community at a time, one investment in human potential at a time. Subscribe to this channel for more stories of triumph over adversity, of nobodies who became somebodies, of genius recognized despite the gatekeepers, because these stories matter. They remind us that the system is broken but not unbeatable, that change is possible but requires work, that every one of us has the power to see the brilliance that others miss. Hit the bell icon so you never miss another story of poetic justice and transformation. And if you know someone who needs to hear Sara's story, someone who's being told they're nobody, someone who's building something brilliant in obscurity, share this video with them. Let them know they're not alone. Let them know their genius matters. Let them know that somewhere someone is looking for exactly what they've built. They just haven't found you yet, but they will. Keep going. The world needs what you're building, even if it doesn't know it yet.